Sam told him, "The reason those men behind us are dying is that they have no control over their thoughts. You must keep things balanced right in your mind. What usually happens when one swordsman has to fight three? Most men cringe and say, 3 swords, and I have but one. Yet the way I look at it, there are only 3 swords, and I am a match for them." You see, I actually quite enjoyed Sam, 10 out of 10 character. It was well past dark by the time the woman entered the tavern on the hill, drenched and chilled by the storm. For 7 days she had been on the road, and for 3 of those days she had been pelted by rain and by winds. By this point, all Red Sonja wished for was warm food, cold ale, and a comfortable bed. This is how the Ring of Ikribu begins. And though all Red Sonja wished for was rest and comfort, instead she finds a man calling to a crowd of people hanging out within the tavern. Named Alice, this young boy is speaking of Lord Olin and the city of Suthad, and talking about how it's fallen to the attacks of a vicious sorcerer only days ago, and here in this inn full of travelers and sellswords, Alice is trying to recruit swords for the cause, retaking Suthad and slaying a sorcerer. So far, however, Alice is having rather poor luck recruiting any of the rowdy men in the tavern. It's a cold night, after all. The storm is raging, and all they wish to do is jest and drink. Sonja, however, enticed by the gold and moved by Alas's words, is the first to lend her sword to Lord Olin's cause, and in doing so she invites the first conflict of the story. A swordswoman signing up draws jests and jokes from the crowds, and one of the more drunk individuals decides to challenge her over it. Of course, Sonja is a more experienced and level-headed swordsman and easily defeats the fool, killing him in the process. Sonja's swordplay, her temper, and her victory quickly change the mood of the drinkers. Sam, a large, boisterous man, is the first to join Sonja in pledging a blade to Olin, and he was followed, slowly at first, then quickly, by other brigands and sellswords. By morning, in fact, virtually all of the tavern-goers had signed on for Olin's quest, and away they rode to meet the Lord in his camp, and in this camp, Red Sonja draws eyes with Lord Olin. Red Sonja often thinks of herself as a good judge of character, and Lord Olin appears to her as a strong, capable man, so she is assured that she made the right choice in signing up for his cause. She also meets other characters in this camp, such as Pallades and Tias, Alice's lover. In the Lord's camp, Sonja is debriefed on the sorcerer, Azroth, and how he, with an army of spirits and demons, besieged Suthad and drove the Lord away from the walls. She is kind of spooked, as are most of the soldiers in Olin's employ, at the idea of having to fight against sorcery, but she has made up her mind, even as others in the employ are kind of shaken by this. Pallades, that is, Duke Pallades, is a man concealed head to toe by armor to hide his disfigurement. Apparently he is so hideous that any who see his face are driven mad, and this disfigurement was gained thanks to the sorcerer. Pallades, as it were, was formerly in Azroth's employ, but he came to warn Olin of the sorcerer's schemes a few days before the attack rang out, and now he seeks his own vengeance upon Azroth, which is why he joined hands with Olin. Unlike Olin, whom Sonja immediately found affinity for, Pallades strikes her as a vile man, but before anything can really be said on the topic, the camp finds itself under attack. Not by men, but by flying beasts in the shape of winged men, vicious and vile. This army of flying devils is terrifying at first, but as Olin's men engage them, it becomes apparent that, beyond flying, they pose little threat. Sonja, Olin, Sam, and others quickly get to work cutting the flying men out of the sky whenever they come close, and the battle is soon won. However, despite the low casualties, Olin finds himself facing the first true challenge of his quest. A group of mercenaries, shaken by the appearance of the demons, pulls out of the company, leaving Olin with fewer men. Still, he decides to continue on his path, and alongside Sonja and the other mercenaries, he departs for Sithad. Along the way, Sonja and Olin talk quite a bit on the road, each finding comfort with the other. Sonja briefly tells Olin of her travels as a sellsword and of her past, her father, and how she came to learn the blade, at least as much as she typically shares. It doesn't take very long for the company to reach Sithad, but instead of some sorceress army, Olin finds nothing. The city is vacant. Azeroth is nowhere to be found. All that remains in Sithad is terrified citizens, and Olin's pretty upset. He demands the city to be searched, and Sonja joins others in combing the streets. It doesn't take long for her to find a suspicious man wandering the alleys. A sorcerer, although not Azeroth. This was Sophis, a man who claims to be an enemy of Azeroth. Sonja brings him to Olin in the city's palace, but before they could really question the sorcerer, news comes of fighting in the streets, of more mercenaries turning traitor and fighting against Olin's more loyal men. The Lord dashes away to deal with this new problem, and Sophis, in turn, takes the chance to slink away into the shadows. Sonja, who refuses to let this sorcerer out of her sight, follows after him through the tunnels and hallways of the palace to one of its long-forgotten inner towers. Along the way, Sonja questions the sorcerer, and Sophis, in turn, tells her of Azeroth, how the man is not truly alive. Instead, he is some sort of horrifying undead revenant. And as they travel, the sound of storms rages beyond the halls. Sophis gives Sonja a bit of a history lesson. He tells her about Ikribu, one of the dark gods from before the age of men. He tells her of Ikribu's cult, which has long been an enemy of Azeroth, and he also tells her of Ikribu's ring, a powerful artifact that had long ago been hidden in this city in Sithad. This ring is a pretty important artifact. It can repel magic, and it's evil but not malicious, if that makes sense. Sophis recovers the ring inside of a magical chamber, and in doing so reveals his true nature. He tries to attack Sonja, intending to kill her, but before he can get the chance, suddenly the tunnel they are in collapses to the sound of distant thunder, and the two are separated by the rubble. All Sonja can hear of the sorcerer is screaming. He is under attack by monsters Sonja cannot yet see. What she can see, however, is the ring, and as Sophis is devoured, Sonja takes the ring, pockets it, and returns to her companions, but what she finds is the monsters attacking the city. You see, Olin and his army are under attack by monstrous worms, giant fleshy abominations composed of tentacles and teeth, and Red Sonja rushes to join the fight, but quickly finds herself caught by one such monster, and even as she tries to fight back, she is crushed by a tentacle, and as she begins to lose consciousness, she feels a strange sensation from the ring in her pocket, but before she can think much on it, her world fades to black and she loses consciousness entirely. She comes to not long after, the monster dead and the threat for now over. With no immediate danger, the men and women of Olin's company have time to rest, and Red Sonja, before she can speak much of Sophis's fate, is interrogated by Pallades. You see, he reveals to everyone that he knows of the Ring of Ikribu. He knows that Azeroth believes it to be in Sithad, and he reveals that he desires the artifact to use it against the sorcerer. And when told of Sophis's death, Pallades demands to know if the cultist has the ring, and while Sonja tells him nothing about it, Pallades spends basically the rest of his appearance with Olin's company demanding that Red Sonja hands over the ring because he is obviously suspicious that she has it. The night in Suthad is a weary one for everyone. A lot happens. Sonja is interrupted in her bath by T.S., Alice's distraught lover, who is fearful for Alice's life. She's interrupted again by Pallades, again while she's bathing. And a bit later, she has a conversation with Lord Olin. You see, throughout their adventure, these two had become quite close, and Olin tries to confess his feelings for Sonja, but in the middle of the night, while she's confronted with a man whom she cares for and who cares for her in turn, Sonja flees. She leaves the palace, leaves the throne room, leaves the city itself, departing into the field beyond the city walls. Red Sonja, a warrior who has slain barbarians, mercenaries, kings, she flees, and Olin follows after her, out of the city into the dark fields under starlight. There he confronts her. Again he attempts to confess his feelings for her, and again Sonja pulls away. Olin presses her, of course, unsure of why she would reject his affections when she so clearly harbors them herself. And here is, for the first time in the story, Sonja reluctantly tells Olin of her true past, of her father and her brother, of betrayal, fire, defilement, and how she alone survived an attack running away into the woods. And she tells Olin of this entity that visits her in the woods, in the forest beyond her family's burning home. She tells of how this spirit or god empowers her with mastery of the blade, and she tells him of her oath to never lay with another man who has not bested her with the sword. And instead of being dissuaded, Olin is practically delighted, and against Sonja's protests, the Lord of Suthad draws out his blade, and these two have their sword fight in the dark. And it's very apparent that Sonja is a furious swordsmaster, batting aside Olin's blade and easily overwhelming him, but before she can inadvertently slay him, their duel is interrupted by more members of the cult of Ikribu who show up and announce basically that while they aren't the enemies of Olin, they don't really care too much for him, but their goal is to go after Azeroth and to slay the sorcerer once and for all. A bunch of stuff happens, a bunch more talking occurs, and eventually Olin's company and this cult agree to go the same way towards Azeroth's palace, and so they set off, making their way towards the sorcerer, and unfortunately between them and the sorcerer lies just the worst possible swamp. This is a properly awful place with quicksand and poisonous beasts and all kinds of nasty things waiting in surprise, and even as Olin's company trudges through the murky waters, they find that Azeroth has laid his dark sorcery upon the swamp. You see, from the muck and the grime rises the dead bodies of those mercenaries who initially abandoned Olin's camp way back after the first assault. These monsters now, because that's what they are, not men, not corpses, monsters, attack Olin's company, and while Olin and his men do have quite a bit of success in destroying these undead abominations, Azeroth's second attack is much more fierce. Rather than sending undead after the company, he animates the swamp itself, turning it into a living hell. The vines, the trees, the insects, everything is animated and seeking to destroy Olin's company, and it is a desperate fight for survival. In fact, Sam, the large boisterous fellow, is grievously injured here, and Olin himself, in a desperate gambit to save his men, plunges headfirst into a monstrous maw and is consumed by the swamp, dying, while Sonja herself, distraught, is helpless to do anything to save him. In the aftermath, Sam does end up dying of his injuries, although fortunately he dies before the cult of Ikribu can sacrifice him for some arcane spell. The cult in fact departs at this point, seeking to attack the evil Azeroth on their own, and a bit later Pallades himself departs, finally managing to convince Sonja to hand over the ring, although convince Sonja is perhaps the wrong term. In fact, he convinces Lord Olin's men to kind of force Sonja to hand it over. And that's kind of where it is. Sonja has to follow after. She's completely convinced of Olin's quest and she wants to see it through. She follows Pallades alongside Alice and Tias and the Cult of Ikribu into Azeroth's horrifying palace. This place, which rests atop a sheer cliff, which is very difficult to climb, is a house of madness and sorcerous traps. Evil magical incantations lie around every corner. There's a point where one of the people traveling with is shrunken down to nothing. It's quite a bizarre place to be in. There's all kinds of traps and sorcerous nonsense going on. Sonja and the Cult of Ikribu, who are basically traveling together at this point, finally catch up to Duke Pallades, who is dead at the door to Azeroth's throne room. You see, while the Ring of Ikribu does grant Pallades protection from the magical traps, Azeroth laid a final poisonous trap at the throne room door itself, a little needle poking out from the handle, which kills Pallades basically. Sonja and the cult break through into the throne room. A sorcerous incantation is performed upon Azeroth, who is forced into his throne and destroyed, but his spirit is not yet vanquished. It possesses Pallades, his corpse, and the man is writhing on the floor in agony until Tias ultimately kills him. You see, earlier in the novel, Tias was given a dagger by Pallades, a sign of resolve, as it were, and here in this moment, she repays that kindness by slaying Pallades before Azeroth's vile spirit can fully overtake him. This encounter is a harrowing one, with many members of the cult being destroyed by Azeroth during their sorcerous duel, and it's left everyone haggard and tired, but ultimately they are victorious. Azeroth is destroyed, the cult, or its surviving members at least, go their own way, and Alice and Tias depart for safety, as it were, and Sonja is left by herself. She hops back on her horse and rides off into the distance, set on more adventures and more travels. And that's the end. As a starting point to the Red Sonja novel series, The Ring of Ikribu does an excellent job of introducing you not only to the titular character herself, but also the world she lives in and the people who inhabit it. In this novel, we learn the mannerisms of both the common man and the nobility. We see the pride that codifies the soldiers and the courage and drive for revenge that drives men like Olin and Pallades forward, even unto their deaths. We learn firsthand how the magic in this world works, some of the feats it's capable of, and how people react to it. For the standard warriors that inhabit the world, sorcery is not just some strange force to be hated, it is a thing to be feared, as to be slain by sorcery is to risk having your soul condemned to the hells. And finally, we learn about Red Sonja, about her past and her skills, her attitude towards others, and her innate drive to do the right thing at all times. In this story, we read about the tragedy of her youth, yes, but we also see tragedy play out before her eyes as she grows feelings for Lord Olin, and she's helpless to watch him charge headfirst to his death. Something that will become a bit of a recurring theme throughout these novels is that, while Red Sonja is herself the main character, the story itself does not revolve around her. Rather, she is an outsider who is pulled into the quest of others. In the Ring of Ikribu, it is Olin and Pallades' quests for revenge that she finds herself entangled in, and while she does have a hand in its resolution, I feel like it's a safe bet to say the story could have taken place much in the same without her involvement. That, I feel, is one of the things I love most about the sword and sorcery genre. its characters are not superheroes. While they may be extraordinary, they are still just men and women whose journeys are dictated by chance encounters and circumstance. The Ring of Ikribu was not Red Sonja's story. It was the story of Olin and Pallades, the story of Suthad and Azroth, a story that has ended, while Red Sonja's story is only just beginning. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, then please leave a like or share this video with a friend. If you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell, you will be alerted whenever I upload new videos. Finally, if you want to support me directly, head on over to Patreon. Patrons keep the channel alive with their donations, and in turn, they get early access to my lore content. Thanks again for watching, and have a great day.